My friends, good day. There was a serious accident last night at New York's LaGuardia Airport involving a Canadair regional jet 900 aircraft that was coming in to land at New York Airport. It had been properly cleared to land on runway 04. So the pilots made their landing in the most normal way possible. Meanwhile, the controller also cleared a fire truck to enter the runway, so this truck had to cross the runway. Why? Because apparently there was another plane that had declared an emergency, so fire trucks were going to assist it. And what happened is that once the pilots landed, they were braking, and suddenly the truck came out in front of them. An impact they couldn't avoid, of course. These are impacts that are very, very hard to avoid. Also keep in mind that it's nighttime and the runway is probably wet. If we look at the meteorological aerodrome report, the meteorological aerodrome report shows that there were a lot of cloud layers. It shows that visibility was limited. Temperature 8 degrees, dew point 8 degrees. That means we have an atmosphere that's very saturated with moisture. By the way, also at the end of the meteorological aerodrome report that I'm going to show you, look at the dollar sign. The dollar sign tells you that the weather station that issued this meteorological aerodrome report is an automatic station. It needs maintenance. When it needs maintenance, it starts adding the dollar sign at the end of meters. So there's something wrong with it. What does that tell us? It tells us that there's a major infrastructure problem in the United States, which is likely at the root of this accident. Why is it important to know that there's no money to pay government employees? This includes, for example, Transportation Security Administration employees. These are the people you see who scan the luggage and make you go through a security gate. And there are several airports today that are asking online that if you go to the airport, if you travel, please bring Amazon gift cards, bring Starbucks cards or others, put in $10, $15, $20 and give them to these agents because they come to work for free or with an extremely reduced salary. So that's where we are. And it's the same for controllers, except that with controllers, you have fewer opportunities to see them, to give them the Amazon card or the McDonald's card. So what's happening is that we have controllers who come, who work long hours, who are understaffed and who are not paid. For example, this controller who authorized the plane to land and the truck to cross the runway at the same time. Well, he was on several frequencies at the same time. He was on the control tower frequency. So he was the one giving landing and departure clearances, takeoff, and also crossing the runway. He was handling the approach frequencies, he was handling the departure frequency, and also he was handling ground control. So we have someone who is jumping from one console to another, and inevitably, mentally, there comes a point where he will be completely overwhelmed. And then eventually what will happen is that, well, there will be mental lapses that cause him to give landing clearance over here and then clearance to cross over there.
It's really... Thing 1 and Company, LaGuardia Tower. Thing 1 and Company. Thing 1 and Company, LaGuardia Tower. Ask me to cross the runway at Delta. Thing 1 and Company, cross the runway at Delta. Thing 1 and Company, cross runway 4 at Delta. Frontier 4195, stop there, please. Thing stop, stop, stop. Thing 1 stop, 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 stop. Thing 1 stop, stop. Thing 1 stop. Delta 2603, go around. Runway heading 2000. Jet 646. Jet 646, you collided with the vehicle. Hold your position. They're on their way since you can't move it.
The runway is closed, 2603.
Go around, runway heading 2000.
Remember, Überlingen, 2002. In Switzerland, there was an air traffic controller who was alone. That day, he was also running between several frequencies to phones that weren't working. That evening, his colleague was sleeping in the room next door, and at one point, he missed it. There was a DHL Boeing 767 that was on a converging course and at the same altitude as a Russian plane. What happened is that the Tupolev and the Boeing collided, and it caused a huge tragedy that affected a lot of people. There were many children on that plane. And then later on, the father of the victim is someone who lost his wife and 2 children, who found... In 2004, 2 years later, he found the conductor near Zurich and killed him. So you see that it's someone who, for example, in this case, was looking for someone to blame. The human brain works like that. We always look for someone responsible. It's like in this case, we say it's the air traffic controller's fault. In other cases, we would have said it's the pilot's fault. But actually, these people are the most immediate cause. They're the closest link in the chain of the accident. That's why we see them. But you have to understand that problems, plane accidents, don't happen to pilots, don't happen to controllers, but happen to organizations. It's always multifactorial. And that's why in the United States, if you look, we've had a lot of similar issues. We've had a lot of near misses. That means planes that were very close to colliding, whether on the ground or in the air. We had the Washington accident, a helicopter against a Canadair regional jet 900 not far from the White House. So we have an increase in this kind of thing, which seems to keep coming back again and again. If you look at this accident, it happened almost in the middle of the runway. That means energetically, it's the worst place, in the sense that a little earlier, maybe the plane could have taken off again if they had seen the truck later. Maybe the energy would have been dissipated. So they could have either braked or had a low energy impact, or maybe been able to go into the field or somewhere else to avoid it. Except that in the middle of the runway, it's the worst place. You have enough energy to cause a lot of damage, but not enough energy to be able to take off again. For example, the impact through the fire truck onto the embankment. It's on its side, the pilots. When you see the impact, you just look at the front, you look at the cockpit, you immediately realize that those pilots couldn't survive that impact. It doesn't look survivable. The entire front of the plane is gone, and actually at one point the plane even seems to be tilted upward, because what happens when the front has been broken? The fact is that the center of gravity of the aircraft shifts backward, since those engines are very far back. What happens is that it will pitch up, so both pilots are killed. That's something we know today. There was a flight attendant who was thrown, who was sitting in that spot behind the cockpit partition, so where the galley is and all that. And so this is someone who was thrown out with her seat. We don't really know what condition she's in. She's in the hospital. We know she's alive. But there you go. It's something that reminds us. An accident we were talking about not long ago, the story from Washington. What's more, it's quite striking. We do understand that there's a financial issue. There's no money. The country is in a state of hidden bankruptcy. Civil servants aren't being paid. Okay, up to this point, that's understandable. But where we have trouble, that's why they always work at such a hellish pace, why they always work with reduced separation in the middle of the night. Because, you know, when you look at International Civil Aviation Organization documents, which the United States doesn't follow to the letter, besides, they have their own standard, but even International Civil Aviation Organization, which recognizes, for example, reduced separation on runways, well, it says you should only do that during the day, but here we are. It's nighttime, you see. So at night, reduced separation means, when I say reduced separation, it can be, for example, an aircraft is cleared to land on a runway. It's on final approach. And for instance, another aircraft or a truck is allowed to cross the runway. So these are reduced separations. These are not things, it's not a luxury they can afford. That's what I mean. The situation is such that today they can't afford to do that. They have to slow down the pace to adapt to the situation, to adapt because they have less staff to adapt. That he doesn't have enough people to put controllers at every frequency. They don't seem to be adapted to that, you see. And so there you have it. We have this kind of accident, which really isn't a surprise. Honestly, when you look at it, it's not a surprise. It was expected. That's it. By the way, in Europe, we've also had incidents like, if you look at Nice a few months ago, a plane almost landed on top of another one. If you look at where it was, I think it was in the Netherlands. I didn't cover it on the channel. It was a plane that tried to take off from a taxiway. So there's some slack in the separation of planes, in management, in air traffic control management, and so sooner or later in air safety. That's how it works. If accidents happen now and then and there are close calls, it means something bigger will eventually occur. There you go, my friends. I'll come back to this story later when a Transportation Safety Board has finished its investigation. But at this stage, we still have a lot of information. And we know that both vehicles, the plane and the firefighters, were authorized to enter at the same time. I also invite you to watch a video about the LATAM one. It's in Brazil. Firefighter vehicle versus Airbus, same thing. It's an accident where the firefighters who were doing a drill entered the runway while an Airbus A320 was taking off. Impact between the two vehicles, but in that case it was the firefighters who paid with their lives for this mistake. It's something that can show us what happens when there's disorganization on an airport platform. That's it. That's what you saw, that's what it is. Let me remind you about the opening of the Parcours Tech channel on YouTube. That channel, just type in Parcours Tech. You'll get there directly. Subscribe. It's a channel that complements this one with more theories. It's not a channel where we're necessarily going to talk about accidents or incidents. We will mention them, but that's not the main focus of the channel. The main focus of the channel is to do what's missing. Today, it's for those who are training in aviation, those who are interested in aviation, weather, navigation, all that, so they can find interesting content. Thanks again for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.